with your... Hello? Working?
It should be.
There we go. Let's see.
The live feed. Is Chris's tablet up to the task?
Okay.
The world may never know.
Watch an app. It wants me to...
Oh. Well, do you have the option to watch it in the browser?
It's not watching it. Let me try refreshing it one more time and see what happens.
You know, I just wondered,
What's up?
when we did this the first time, we were all in this little room.
Correct.
Are the mics on those even going to pick us up at that distance?
Yeah.
Good point.
I don't know how loud.
We don't know.
Yeah, all I'm getting is the photo once I refresh, but it's not playing the video.
Why don't we just use your phone to watch it?
Works just fine.
So you're able to watch yourself?
And the volume's okay too.
Is it delayed that much? That's live right now?
Apparently. I don't see a way to...
So it's like a minute
It
or
might
30 seconds behind.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You know what? They probably started doing that after people started going live and shooting other people.
That actually happened?
Oh.
Several times.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's not...
I can
Some
see
dude
that.
went live and went and shot a reporter.
Oh.
Do you remember the Moss shooting in New Zealand?
Yes.
Facebook Live.
Oh.
Yep.
Wow.
Wow. We live in a terrible world
Yes,
sometimes.
we do.
A world that needs love and Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably started doing that after those things happened. But it's not preventing all of them, because actually another one just happened where someone went live. And I don't know if they hurt somebody else or they hurt themselves, but yeah, there was something else that just went and was broadcast live on Facebook, and it shouldn't have been.
Yeah. Clearly.
Alright, so we do have Georgina going.
There you go.
Hi, Georgina.
She's probably our #1 fan.
She is.
That's right. Top fan badge right there.
It is going to be a little weird to see myself not moving.
Right.
Or being 30
Exactly,
seconds
yeah.
behind.
So
But
don't pay too much attention to it.
yeah.
Well, it's mostly there for the commentary.
If it screws you up, we'll just go without.
Exactly.
She said hi,
Yes.
so she's listening.
Yeah.
Sup.
Thank you.
Just real quick, Georgina, since we have your attention,
Tell your friends.
tell your friends. No, but also I wanted to see if you can hear us okay, or if it sounds like we're too quiet. I don't know if you can answer that question.
In 30 seconds or so.
Yeah.
Well, it sounded okay over here.
Just real quick,
Oh, yeah.
since we have
I mean, that's at max volume of this device, but still, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I can share your video.
Yes.
Loud and clear. All right.
Yeah, that's
All right,
and then
cool.
it shares it to all your friends, and so. Well, we haven't started recording yet.
No.
But
So
we
what we'll
can-
do is we'll just hit record, and then we'll just kind of chat.
Get
And at
into it.
some point, we need to do the
Intro.
intro.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, we were kind of talking about,
Topic.
we were trying to figure out actually what we can kind of waste time with the first 5 minutes of just kind of chatting,
Well, you
getting
could do that.
comfortable into chatting,
Yes.
and then jumping into the topic, which we were going to talk about why church,
Okay.
why go to church, what's the benefit of that,
Pleasure.
but more of like a personal,
Nate, would you be prepared to answer questions about that kind of thing?
Yes.
If I asked you, hey, you've been coming to Rockridge Church lately, kind of why get back into it now? And what's that experience
Yes.
been like? What have you been getting
Right.
from it? What have you been bringing to it?
Yeah, I could answer that.
Because you're not just coming, you're serving.
Right, and
so we can go
Oh,
ahead
yeah.
and start recording.
and then we should do.
Oh yeah, let me
Yeah,
throw this
let's
on.
go flip the switch. So yeah, would you be prepared to answer questions
Yeah.
about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, do it off the cuff. Do it loud.
I just would never want to ask you anything that you're not ready to answer.
I'm
You know what
pretty
saying?
open. I'm a pretty open book usually.
Cool.
And if I don't like something, I'll say something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get the idea.
Exactly.
So you can just give me a verbal sign,
Right.
Or
A non-verbal.
A hand sign,
non-verbal
yeah.
cue. Yes.
Did you ever take a sign language class?
No, I
No.
wish I wish I had. Kim knew sign language pretty well. She
Really?
took a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, I took. Well, they say 2 years. Really, it was 2 semesters.
Nice.
I guess actually 3 semesters. I took 3 semesters of it in college, and I was so scared because I took the first semester, MSJC, my first semester of college. Right, I took sign language, and then like 2 years go by, maybe more, maybe like 2.5 years, and I'm at Azusa, and they tell me, well, you have to take another semester of a foreign language to graduate.
Oh.
Thankfully, ASL 2 is being offered, and I'm like, dude, I'm 2 years removed from ASL 1.
Okay.
How am I supposed to pass ASL 2?
Ah, I see.
Thankfully, I got a really bad professor
Ah.
and skirted by with a B.
Very
So,
nice. Very nice.
I'll say this much though: sign language, easiest time I've ever had learning another language. Maybe because there's no accent.
Yeah.
Oh.
As good as I am at doing accents.
Aren't there accents though?
That's debatable.
Like, just in ways that you sign. Like, can't there be like
Well,
dialects
there
of
is
ASL?
Yeah, there is. So there's
pretty sure there is.
right, the whole reason we call it ASL is because it's American Sign
Because
Language.
there's also a pretty big French one. If
Yeah,
I
and
recall.
there's BSL, British Sign Language,
Oh.
and then you know what? There's all kinds of like folk sign language, you know, local sort of signs, sayings. And one thing that I did glean from ASL 2 is it is acceptable, right, if you're not a deaf person and you don't know the sign for something, to sort of do your best to just get the message across, right?
Right.
Combine the signs you do know, with sort of acting out the signs you don't know,
Mhm.
or asking, you know, hey, how do I sign and spelling something, you know, or doing an action, right? So if I was like, well, how do I sign stabbing?
That's. I think that was it.
Yeah.
That looked good.
No, it might be. I mean,
Yeah.
some signs are really predictable,
Yeah.
right? You know what the sign for ride a motorcycle is? You probably do. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Good.
But then some are more confusing, like the sign for dog, right? You guys are both dog lovers.
Mhm.
This is dog.
Huh.
So if you were going to say,
But it's got to be down by your hip, right?
yeah,
I recall?
yeah, but you know it's hard to illustrate right now. So if you were going to say, I walked my dog, it's walked my dog
Wow.
today.
Look at you.
You know,
You're bilingual.
not really. If I was filling out a resume and they said, do you speak any other languages, I would not tell them that I know how to sign.
That's
because I
right.
don't.
Yeah.
All right.
Mike told me that years ago, someone used to come to Rockridge and sign the sermons.
Oh,
Really?
that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Fun. That's a
I never
interesting
saw it,
ministry.
so obviously this was several years ago.
Were there any deaf
There had to have been.
congregational?
There had to have been at least one.
It
Yeah.
must have been.
Or is it just somebody's like, I really got to do this? Who knows?
Well,
Yeah.
they could have felt.
Who knows who comes in?
I would like to
The
see
ministry, but-
some of our Revelation sermons signed.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty
all
cool.
that.
Yeah.
All that metaphor.
Fire
and all that.
brimstone.
Yeah. Oh. That could be cool.
At my seminary, there was a deaf student, so all of our chapel services were signed, and I preached a lot of our chapel services. So it was interesting to be up there delivering a message. Can't really call it a sermon because our chapel services were only like 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
So we had to keep it brief, and it was usually just sort of a time of rest and encouragement in between classes, you know. So it was interesting to see my own words signed live, you know.
Yeah.
And I hope she was a real signer because, as it turns out, there are several people who have been busted as being like fake
I've seen some videos.
signers. One of them worked for the White House. One of them worked for
I saw
Obama's
that
White
one.
House.
I saw that.
And she was just like stumbling her way through with all this fake sign language, and they finally caught her.
Well, because you get like $400 to do like that half-hour thing,
So
and
they're in it
nobody
for the
else really, like, is like, I don't know. Nobody in charge is able to like tell if you're doing it for real.
Yeah.
They only find out because later some deaf person is like, "What is that person doing?" So
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, they may not walk up and say it like that.
Right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Fair.
they might sign it.
Well, they could still say it. It just might sound weird.
Maybe.
All right. Should we get into this?
Yes.
Let me ask you one more question first.
Okay.
Should we ever since we are broadcasting this,
Sure.
should we ever make a conscious effort to not look like trash?
Probably. I mean, if we're going to continue doing.
I mean, I do
videos,
have a
yes.
suit. I could throw my suit on.
No, just
Much.
make an effort to look like you didn't just come from the gym.
Even
Which is what
even
exactly
if
you
we did. Yeah.
Well, here.
I understand.
I don't think we look terrible.
No, you're fine.
I do.
You do? You're just wearing the gray version of what I'm wearing.
You might be a little sweaty. but that's
Well, I'm
okay.
always a little sweaty.
Right. We talked about that last time.
But can you tell that that's sweat, or does it just look like shadows?
I mean, it seems all right.
I don't know.
Other than just pointing it
I'm
out.
just a big gray blob at this point.
Well,
so
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm just wondering. It's just a thought.
I guess I
Like,
could have put on
should I bring
pants.
a change of clothes next Monday,
Probably.
like a polo?
If it would make you feel more confident
Or a
and
V-neck.
comfortable.
exactly. It's all about self-confidence.
Do you think I'm at a point in my life where V-necks would be inappropriate?
I have one, and I recently got into wearing it.
No.
Yeah.
It's inappropriate.
Well,
Stop it.
I wear it every so often.
skinny dudes can wear V-necks. If I wore a V-neck, it would just be,
I'd have to see
it
it.
would be a window on my chest that gives you a view of hair and
Oh, you're one of those guys. Yeah.
fat. One
I
of
don't know.
those guys.
Just
Yeah.
bring it. Bring a couple of shirts, and then you can try it out.
This
Alright.
isn't a TV.
And if it's just too distracting, we'll tell you to go change.
All right.
we don't need costume change.
No, I know. You didn't see my
For the
costume
first
on the
15
radio?
minutes, you wear this shirt. For the following 15 minutes, you'll change.
We could do like, we could get real elaborate with it. Do like masked singer level costumes.
I think Georgina would appreciate it if I wore the Kylo Ren mask.
She probably would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the blanket around here somewhere.
I know
should
you
just
do.
wear it.
You have the shoes too.
I do. They're right there. No, they're upstairs.
Oh,
But yeah.
yeah.
Anyways,
All right.
are you gonna do the sign on?
Yeah. Let's just take a second here.
You remember, he's Chuck. I'm Rex.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's your middle name?
It's Scott, but we don't.
Scott.
Can we just call him Nate the Great?
Yeah.
Nate the Great.
That would be
Producer
preferable.
Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right. Dutch is around here somewhere.
Yeah, he's.
Did you send
he's-
him out?
What?
Did you send him out? Did
No,
you
I didn't send him out. I
Because
just
I just
wanted
haven't
to-
seen him in a minute.
Yeah,
And
he does his own thing.
he got me
I mean,
this. He got me this Diet Coke.
he gets us set up and then he's
and then I
just
haven't
gone.
seen him.
Yeah.
If he's gonna have this internship, I gotta see him a little more than I see him right now.
Yeah.
Probably.
I text him, but you know my phone.
Yeah, your phone's
over there.
preoccupied.
So you know what? If he tunes in, you go
I'll
ahead.
keep
You
an
let
eye-
me know.
I'll keep an eye on it.
Because maybe he's I don't know. Maybe he went home and he's watching us from home. He
Yeah.
shouldn't be. He's our intern, but you never know. I don't know. He's a mysterious guy.
He could be at the gym. Maybe he's running.
He could be at the gym.
Maybe he's running on the treadmill and he's watching us.
You know what? Dutch has to step up his game.
Yeah.
Because if I catch up to him, he's fired.
Oh.
I can't bench as much as
No.
Dutch, but I put up 255 the other day.
Really?
So he was only doing 315 when I interviewed him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's only a 60-pound difference right now
You're getting
between
there.
me and him. So if I catch up to him,
I feel like that last 60 pounds is a big step up.
oh well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 60 pounds on any exercise is a lot. So.
Yeah, that's about my max on anything right now.
Well, it's almost a third of your body weight. It's more than a third of your body weight, 60 pounds.
Yeah.
So be proud of that. You know?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll let
Alright.
you sign us in here and then we can start talking.
Okay.
And we can edit things, so don't feel pressured.
Just remember, we're not characters.
No,
We are ourselves.
sort of.
Turned up to 11.
Yes. I'm a better version of myself when we're doing this than when we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the stories are real. The people are real. We're not worried about our image. This is it.
That's
This
right.
is the real thing. Episode 2 of Run Amok with Rex and Chuck with Nate the Great, now sitting at the same table with us. Nate the Great, of course, is our stalwart producer who will look up things on command and keep us updated on the live stream. So thank you, Nate the Great,
You're
for
welcome.
joining us in the studio from now on.
Yeah.
Thanks for being willing to take this on with us.
It's an honor.
I, of course, again, am Chuck, my fearless teammate, Rex.
What's up?
So today we've come together to coalesce around one central question. That question is just why church? Why be part of a church? Why
Mhm.
have the church? If you're not in a church now, why should you be a part of one? If you're in one, why should you stay in it? What should you be doing in it?
Mm.
What do you stand to gain from being part of a church? Is there a theological reason to even be in one. And then maybe towards the end we'll explore the state of the church, at least as far as we know it. Of course, we want to avoid putting down the church as a corporate body. I'm not into that at all.
No, and we're not going to use any specific examples of churches.
No, of course
Just
not.
kind of our general understanding of what's going on. We're not here to just kind of point fingers at anybody.
No, absolutely not.
We just want to share what our experiences are and what we can hopefully just kind of put out there as something that you can take and try to look into your own life and think, well, is that what I'm experiencing, or is that what I'm afraid of? Just try to get it to be just real for everyone.
Yeah. Now you both have church in your youth background.
This is correct.
No, I did not grow up in the church, if that's what you're asking.
You were never part of like a youth group.
No.
For some reason I thought you were.
I was a youth leader in my 20s.
Okay, that's
It was a
probably what I'm
different thing.
thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started coming to the church as an adult.
I was 18
Yeah.
when I first started coming to a church.
Yeah. So
And
you
the only-
waited until you could vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only reason I went is because I was dating Amanda, who went.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, if you want to date me, you should probably go to church.
Always good.
So we have a good mix then. So Nate, I know you grew up in the church because I was your neighbor
Yes.
for the first 5 years of my life, 5 or
This is
6
correct.
years.
Yes.
Which is a whole other story that
Yeah.
we'll touch on.
Someday.
Someday.
But I know you guys were in the church because, you know, our mutual friends we had, your other neighbors, and we knew the Johnsons as like, whoa, that's the really religious family. And it's crazy because I now pastor the church that the really religious family goes to.
That is correct.
So, and then Chris, of course, joined as an adult, and I joined as an adult. Rex, of course, joined as an adult, and I joined as an adult. So let me put this question out to both of you.
Mhm.
Nate, we'll go with you first. If someone were to come up to you now, someone who's not in a church, let's say someone who's never been to a church, right? And they're sort of on the fence. They've seen a Bible once or twice. They've seen the Passion of the Christ, you know, and they got really into the performances there. Big Mel Gibson fans. And they say, Nate, you go to a church. I'm kind of thinking about it. What's it like? Why should I go? Why should I go to a church? What are you going to say?
Well, why should you go? There's a lot of good things about it. I mean, we don't want to. There is a little bit of a hesitation, I feel like, from some people who see a church as organized religion, and that has a bad, association in their mind for some reason, whether it's a past experience or some just built-in prejudice. But I don't see it that way. For me, it's a place of peace, comfort, support. It's nice to have a sort of a large secondary extended family, if you will, who you can count on for support and to hold you accountable if you need to be held accountable for certain things, to help you along just with life, and not to discount everything else, because it's important for your faith, and it's important for growing your faith. But there is also a very good, I would say, social aspect of it, which is you become part of something that it's like another circle of friends or family, I guess. And it's, like I said, it's something that you can count on, that is not going to go away or just leave you by the wayside just because something, you have some troubles in your life or something. I guess, I don't know if that answered the whole question, but that's
Yeah,
at least
no,
some thoughts on it.
we're tracking in all the right directions here. So you see a huge social benefit from it.
Mhm.
You mentioned it gives you access, let's say, to a whole new circle of people that you could consider family. Having grown up in it, I'm sure there's all kinds of activities that you got to be a part of,
Yes.
that are unique to the church, things that you would not be able to do outside of a church context.
Mhm.
Hume Lake, for instance. I don't know if you ever went, but
I
that would
did
be an
not.
example of that.
Yeah, but
the
there
youth-
were other youth events, retreats, camps, etc.
Yeah.
Not Hume Lake specifically. I don't know why. It might have been earlier at that point in that particular church's lifespan, they might not have been able to afford it or might not have heard it. But
Yeah, it's
we
not a
did-
cheap camp.
We
No,
did other
it's not.
things.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of,
Yeah.
a lot of churches don't go just because they can't get spots.
Yes.
You know, there's only 10 weeks in the summer camp, they can only take so many kids, on and on and on. But, you know, it is a locked business, shall we say. So, Rex, sort of the same question, man. If someone were to come up to you and they're saying, hey man, I saw the Passion. I know a thing or two about Jesus. I've heard of him.
Right.
You know, I'm not sure if it's truly resurrected, but you know, there's a church in my neighborhood, and they seem like nice folks. But you know, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Why should I go? You're part of a church, right? Why should I
Right.
go?
Well, I mean, I don't want to just say everything that Nate just said, but I think he's right on it with the sense of community that you can get in a church. That is, to me, what drew me into the church. When I first started going, I went because Amanda, but what really finally made me realize that, oh wait, God is real, was through being in a small group, you know, meeting in a home with, you know, I think there was, it's like 10 people. We were all in our like early 20s when I started going to small groups or life groups, and they were so welcoming to having me there, and they all knew I wasn't a believer yet, but they wanted me to be there. They were encouraging. They never pressured me, but they loved on me in a way that I had never really experienced, especially outside of like my own family. Like I never actually believed that people could care like that for somebody else. I kind of just grew up with the notion that everybody's just out for themselves, and if you like allow yourself to be kind of tricked into joining something or going to some group or going to a church, that they were going to take advantage of you in that setting. And it just kind of opened my eyes to really what community can be like. And I want to bring up that my dad, he's actually been a part of a lot of different groups, not church groups, but like he would get really involved with like a Corvette club, and then he'd get really involved with Harley Davidson club, and so they were in all these different things and made a lot of friends out of it. But I always just looked at that later, and now that I'm a Christian, I look at that and I go, man, is he just looking for what I have? Like he's just trying to find a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Which I really get out of going to church, and that's you got to find the right church for you. I'm not going to say that every church is going to be a perfect fit for everyone, but
Yeah, absolutely not.
but it can provide a place for you to feel like you're in a family, in a place where you can belong.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason church hopping is a thing, you know, and it's not just because people are fickle or self-serving or anything else. You know, that there really are certain things about certain churches that people appreciate. You know, Corey and I went to one church before we settled on Rockridge, and for me it was, I was brand new in the faith, and I felt like I needed to know more about what was in Scripture, and I needed sort of less of a religious show.
Mm-hmm.
And then we stumbled upon Rockridge on the invitation of a former, well, I don't want to say a former friend, they're still friends, but someone who used to live in the area, and they said, hey, why don't you come try our church out? And we wound up at Rockridge, and
Yeah.
the first time I listened to Mike preach, I just was sold. You know, I thought, man, this is that kind of biblical, historical education I've been looking for.
Nice.
You know,
Props to Mike.
yeah, he sold me, and I'll tell you this much: it's been such a blessing to hear from people who are in our church now come up and tell me, you know, the first time I was here, you preached, and that's part of the reason we stayed. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who said that?
Came back.
No, don't tell me.
Nobody needs to know. But you know, rest assured, it has been said once.
Once, at least.
Yeah, at least.
All right.
So what I'm getting most so far is that the sense of community is appreciated.
Yeah.
That it is uniquely a family environment. And when I say family environment, I don't mean like a family movie where it's appropriate for all ages. I mean that it is something beyond, these are my friends, right? Or this is my affinity group. You know, it's something beyond this is the Corvette Club,
Mhm.
or I
Right.
guess in my case, like, oh, this is the pro wrestling fandom club. Because you can coalesce around love for a thing,
Right.
but that doesn't necessarily foster community.
It's not the same as building love for one another and taking care of each other in a way that you can do in a church.
Yeah.
I guess you could do that in other places, but a church is really kind of designed to that end.
Yeah, I mean, you could, and I'm sure that does happen in affinity groups like car clubs or fan clubs of whatever art, let's say. But in the church, there's a spiritual, theological imperative, a command, a sense that this must happen here or this must be done here, that we would be something more than friends, that we would be willing to do difficult things together in relationship, things like holding one another accountable, giving up our property for the benefit of one another. Stuff like you would see in Acts or Paul's epistles, where these people are clearly intimate with one another on a level that goes beyond friendship, on a level that really we would define as these are brothers in the faith.
Right. Yeah.
They give each other access and permission to do things that are so far beyond what we would consider in the Western world to be friendship. It's
Right.
the only place, the only group, the only organization where we feel like we are beholden to God to foster that kind of community. A Corvette Club is not.
Right. No.
They are.
I mean, it could be a really cool Corvette club.
It
that's
could.
Also serving God, one another, and driving sweet cars.
That's
I feel
right.
like that's an
Yeah.
idea waiting to happen.
Yeah, let's start it.
It may have already happened.
Oh,
Probably.
well, let's start another one.
Yeah.
Just so I can have an excuse to go out and spend money I don't have and buy a Corvette.
Can we start the wrestling club instead?
No, nobody likes wrestling.
Oh, well,
Except for you and
Wah,
Georgina.
wah,
that's fine. I guess wrestling's not as cool as Corvettes.
Well, to be fair, I don't wrestle and I don't own a Corvette either.
Easy
So
for you to say.
Yeah.
yeah.
So there is something unique about church community, and that is defined by the presence of God there
Yeah.
and the role of the Spirit. We have this imperative to be a unique community that nobody else has. What do you think are some of the most important roles the church plays in society right now?
Oh.
Why does society need us, the church?
Say it again.
Why does society need us as the church?
Well, I don't think society would say they need us. I'm going to stipulate that real quick. But I think we kind of are a means for God to be pushing back on, I don't know if corruption is the right word, but we can provide a level of morality, I think, and a place to take care of the community. Because the church actually isn't called to just take care of just ourselves. We're supposed to be taking care of our communities, which includes everyone around us. It's not just us. Some churches don't do that, or some churches maybe aspire to do that, but just haven't found their means of doing it. But that's what we should be. We should be going out, helping the widows, helping the orphans, helping the poor, and in a lot of cases we do. And I read somewhere that actually the United States is the leading country for giving.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is it just comes from the ideals that started our country, and it helps that we're also like a powerhouse and we have money to give.
Yeah, we have the economic availability and the economic power to be a giving country, which is wonderful.
Right. But who
it's-
tells people? Well, I don't know. Who tells people to take care of one another? Outside of the church, I feel like a lot of people would say that that's just an inherent morality that we've developed over centuries of being a species, but I
Yeah.
don't see that when I'm raising my child.
Yeah, someone I met actually at a Metallica concert. Corey and I wound up in a theological discussion with some strange woman.
At a Metallica concert.
Yeah, in the nosebleed
That's
seats
pretty awesome.
of the Metallica S1 E02 show up in San Francisco. So evangelism really can't happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing she tried to tell me, based on, 'cause she had a Christian spiritual background, but she had also been, shall we say, drawn astray by worldly, especially Eastern philosophy, Buddhism, stuff like that, Confucianism, on and on and on. And one thing she tried to tell me is that the biblical concept of self-sacrifice, or putting yourself second, was invented in the first century by people who were trying to make city life more livable. That this doctrine was essentially invented so that people would just treat each other better. That there was nothing inherently God-given about it. God didn't define it. It was invented by these people in the first century.
That seems like it kind of means that she believes that people are kind of inherently terrible to one another.
Yeah, and I'm sure
that we would need to kind of fix that.
Yeah, I'm sure she would agree. Of course, the pushback against that is that no, this principle of self-sacrifice is not, it's not endemic to us. It was handed to us by God as this law that is supposed to give shape to the way we treat one another. It's supposed to be something that lives in our hearts, this desire to lift others up, to be agents of justice and peace in our communities, motivated by our love for God himself, motivated by our desire to serve the Lord wherever he sends us. That it's not something that we just invented.
Right.
It's not something that is nice, that it makes life easier in a certain urban setting. It is a theological imperative. It is something that we essentially owe to God in our obedience to him.
I'm not sure where it makes our lives easier as a whole. Because if you're living that lifestyle, I wouldn't say that it makes your life easier.
It may not make your life easier, but it makes the life of the community better, I suppose, when people approach one another with this ethic of I'm going to sacrifice so that you may have a better time, a better life, more things, so that you can be taken care of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now you mentioned, one of the things you mentioned was that society needs the church because we are sort of this moral agent in the community. Let's be real, there are moral failures within the church probably at the same rate that there are moral failures outside the church.
Right. Yeah.
I guess the key difference is that we have a central authoritative guide for how we would define a moral failure, one that we believe is given to us by God, and that we are uniquely a community that says we admit and are open about our status as sinners. We are freely admitting that we do not live up to the moral standard, let's say, set forth by Scripture, by our Christian ethics, that we are in need of grace, but that there's nothing, because we are openly admitting it, there's nothing necessarily hypocritical about it. So when we say we're a moral agent, I guess what we mean is not that we are the moral betters of our community, but that we are a community that strives to bring a system of ethics into the community, a system of morality into the community that is defined by God and communicated in Scripture, shaped by the Spirit, communicated to us spiritually. One that does send us out to edify others, to stand up for justice, to make sure hungry people get fed, to make sure the naked are clothed, prisoners are visited, things like that. And though there are a lot of groups that have very good missions, that have ethics of what they would call social justice, things like that, the church is this community that uniquely goes forth with a God-given set of morals. So when we say we're a moral agent, it's not because we are morally better than any other group. It's because we are doing our best to take our morals, take them outside the walls of the church, and live them out in our communities.
Now when you say we are doing our best, I don't know that we can say that as like a blanket statement for the church. Because there are a lot of instances where churches are definitely not doing their best. And in fact are really messing things up. They're really hurting their communities, which is really unfortunate that that has to be the way it is. But as you said, we are still people. Like we all, every group of people is going to have that bad egg, so to speak. But when we as a church fall off course like that, I think we get, there's more that's damaged in that than, sorry, it looked like it stopped. We're gonna start over. When we as a church fall off course and do more damage than good, or doing damage to our communities, there's more than just that initial hurt, because now you've got a lot of people looking at that and saying, I don't want anything to do with that, because now they've looked at that one individual and labeled the whole church is like that individual.
Yeah, and that's something that has been a part of the Christian public life since the first century. Go back through the epistles. Galatians is the first one that comes to mind, but it is so present in Acts and present in other letters that Paul wrote. This call to live in a uniquely Christian way in public life. So in Galatians, for instance, he is telling the people in that town, the people in that Christian community, do your work joyfully. When you're in public life, have an attitude of joy. Mm-hmm. Don't grumble about the work that you have to do. Don't let people accuse you of being bitter or angry or unsatisfied. Radiate joy wherever you go. And he actually tells them through that people will be brought to wisdom. And of course, wisdom, as Scripture understands it, begins with the knowledge of God. Mm-hmm. So essentially he's giving the Galatians this message that some people will be converted just by observing your joy.
Right.
So when you say more damage is done when Christian communities visibly, publicly fail to live up to their ethical, moral imperative, when a Christian community does damage to the community around it, you're right, the effect is tragic. Because not only does that damage the community, it damages the perception of the church. And it allows people, it gives them an excuse to view us as they may already want to view us.
Right,
as
yeah.
This hypocritical organization of broken people pretending to be something we're not. And I can't think of many things more heartbreaking than that.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate, and I know that for me when I was in high school and hearing about Christians, I remember thinking, oh, that's not going to ever be for me, because that's just hypocrites. I only ever saw what was shown on the news, and sometimes they would show like, hey, this church donated to this cause and helped these people, but more often than not you see the harmful effects of somebody doing something they shouldn't have. And that really did guide me, because that was my only real source of who a Christian was watching TV, because I didn't know any. And again, that comes back to why church? You're going to actually get to know some real people and see them living life, and seeing how they're living life, and how, I think most importantly, how they deal with one another, and how they deal with tragedy, and how they can support each other and turn to God when they need to. And to do it in a public way, or do it in a way of inclusion, it helped me to finally realize that, okay, I'm only getting one side of the story when I'm just watching TV or whatever. And yeah, like you said, some of it is too, like you hear what you want to hear. But if that's the only way that you're like judging a church is just from the outside, you're not getting the full picture. And if you think you are, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah.
And some people are okay with that, and one day God's gonna find you, and maybe He'll have to be a little bit more extreme with getting you into a church, but hopefully He does. I pray that He will get you into a church, because you need it, even if you don't realize you need it, and you will find joy there. There's just so much that you can get out of it, and then there's also the joy of what you can put into it, which is a whole nother level, which once I started doing ministry, I discovered all that I was getting through being in a life group and receiving that kind of like just unquestioned love, like you are a human being and we love you, thank you for being here. I was able to then turn that around and start giving that out. Working with the youth group, working on the worship team, it provides me an outlet to serve others, and I get joy out of that. It's not just, oh, I get to have fun playing guitar and singing. It's also, I get to know that people are benefiting from what I'm doing. I get to play with the team that I have, which is always fun. I work with great people. It's a blessing in my life.
So, community has been a huge part of your spiritual experience. The Christian ethic that you really can come as you are and be welcome among Christians, be welcome in the church, has been a huge part of your spiritual experience.
Yeah, I mean, I walked in as a very quiet, I don't really want anything to do with this kind of personality and mentality. I probably wore like an Iced Earth shirt because I'm a metalhead.
For anyone who doesn't know, Iced Earth is a metal band, great thrash black metal band. Would you call that accurate? Probably not black.
No, I wouldn't say black metal.
Yeah.
Just metal.
Yeah.
Thrash. American metal.
Yeah, I might be trying to get too specific.
Yeah, no, you're going too far.
But they're really fantastic. For anyone who is hearing this, go ahead and look up an album called The Glorious Burden.
You would recommend that one.
Yeah.
It is not a Christian band, but I still listen to music that I enjoy.
We all
do. Yeah.
We're not perfect people.
Yeah, but listening to heavy metal is not necessarily a sign of imperfection.
No,
either,
I mean, there's some Christian metal bands. I mean, I might question just how Christian they are, but they exist.
I wanted to revisit your experience of Christian community just for a moment, because I don't want to miss this chance to encourage those who are listening. If you have never made contact with a Christian community, or if it's been a long time since you've encountered a Christian community, hear this story, hear this testimony that Rex has, because it can be a powerful encouragement and reminder that the Christian spiritual community on its best day has a God-given motivation to welcome you with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it is my prayer that if you ever choose to re-engage discussion with a group of Christians who you know, be it a church, a small group that meets at someone's house, a small group that meets in a little coffee shop, wherever you might find us, it is my prayer that if you work up the courage and feel encouraged to do it, if you work up the courage just to go over and sit down and say hello, it's my prayer that they would greet you with the kind of greeting that you deserve and the kind of greeting that Scripture calls for. And I'm confident that most of them would. So I want you to hear Rex's story on this and just feel so driven to seek out a Christian community somewhere near you, and just I know it's hard, but do that difficult work of just saying hi, introducing yourself, taking a seat at the table, even if you say nothing, if you just listen, but just experience the joy of being welcome among others.
Yeah, I'm a worship leader and I'm doing a podcast and talking a lot, but I am actually probably the most introverted person in my various circles.
Oh, this is absolutely true. So here's another great Rex story.
Oh no.
For his birthday, Rex and I take a road trip to Fresno and go see Metallica at the basketball stadium up there at Fresno State University. I am bouncing off the walls. And I look in the chair next to me, and there's Rex sitting, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the music,
Yeah.
but so still. And there's a couple other guys near us, and they're sort of, banging into each other, as you might expect people to do at a heavy metal concert. And at one point, Rex leans over to me, and he just says, "Those guys are just annoying me so much and giving me so much anxiety because I just want to sit and enjoy the music."
Yes. Yeah, there's a level of anxiety there for me. We actually almost had an opportunity to go into the pit, remember?
Yes, we did.
The guy came up and he was trying to, I think he was looking for young women, but you tried really hard to get his attention so that we can go down there and you're like, this is his first concert with Metallica. And I was sitting there like looking at you and I'm like, Charles, no, I don't want to do that.
I would
Chuck,
like you.
Chuck, no, I don't want to do it.
It's okay. One name is short for the other, so people are going to know.
I'm going to
It's
edit
fine. Okay.
it. I'll fix it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, this actually can be for both of you. What was the scariest thing about going to church the first time? I don't know if you remember. You might have just been like, you were in church, Nate.
Yeah, I was pretty much there from when I was a toddler.
Were you scared at all to
No.
re-engage church all these years later?
That's a different question, yeah. So, and I don't think we have time to go to the whole story now, but I did, I would say, take a break from it for a little while, and then came back into it. Certain things in my life led to that, which we won't get into yet. But it wasn't scary. It was actually kind of nice. It was, I wouldn't even say that there was anything to be scared or nervous about, other than just the fact that I hadn't seen some of these people in a long time that I would consider family, and that I would be asked such questions like, "Hey, where have you been?" or "What's going on?" or something like that. But
would you say that's the hardest part, that they wanted to know where you've been, or?
It's possible. Yeah, but and for me, it wasn't even that big of a deal. It's not like I made up excuses. I just told them, well, I was gone for a while, and we can get into it if you want, but it's a long story. So
Yeah.
But no, it was great. It was I didn't have a problem. It was nice to come back to it.
What about you, Charles? What about you, Chuck?
To be 100% honest, when I first started coming to church, I'm an adult. I'm in my 20s. I'm dating my now wife. I was terrified. I was afraid that I would not be accepted, that they would find me out, and expose me. I actually had a fear that as we engaged the church together, someone would come along and tell Corey, "You should not be with this person."
Because you weren't a believer at the time.
Because I was still coming into that, yeah. I was praying, and I had grown into a sense that yes, God is real, yes, Jesus is real, and is who he says he is, but I had not elected to belong to a church. I just wasn't sure what the community would be like. Yeah. And I had this real fear that as soon as these people pull the covers off of me and they see me for who I am, and they know that I like heavy metal, and they know that I, went and fought in a war, and they know that I don't know, fill in the blank for whatever interest it is, because I didn't think any interest I had was valid or good.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they find out who I am, they are going to convince Corey to leave me, and I'm going to be alone again.
Yeah.
I had a real fear about that.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the exact opposite happened.
This guy's good.
Yeah,
Marry him.
Well, yeah, sort of.
Mostly.
Corey and I eventually, we got engaged at church, in front of the church,
There you go.
because they had voiced their love for us
In the tent.
so clearly.
Yes.
No,
No,
we weren't
not
in the
the
tent
tent.
yet.
Oh,
we were
that was
still
building.
we were
That's
still
right.
renting a building in
Yes.
Temecula. But they had given us really a clear endorsement, not just that, we like you as individuals, but you know what? We like you guys as a couple. We like to be
Yeah.
around you. We like it when you guys are together. So I felt confident enough about our place in the church, where I said, hey, let me propose to her in front of the congregation.
Yeah.
And Mike and I worked up a whole plot to do that. That worked out really well.
Nice.
And the worship team was a part of it and everything. But so that was a real incredible journey to go from, oh my gosh, these people, they're gonna take her away from me, and they're gonna have all the right reasons for doing it. But I had a real anxiety about that.
Yeah.
To go from that place to, this is our family, and I wouldn't want to get engaged to this woman without our family.
I don't know if I just had like a skewed level of confidence. I didn't think anybody was gonna take Amanda from me, but I definitely had that feeling of I'm an imposter here.
Well,
Like,
we're gonna get into that in another episode, I think.
sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
we can,
Because that's an interesting topic.
because there's still a latent sense of that sometimes,
Right.
isn't there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I have it too,
Mhm.
a little bit,
Yeah.
And it's not the community's fault
No.
at all. It's just something that's in me that still has this feeling, not that they're gonna like expose me as not being a real Christian, because I absolutely would go to the mat and say I am a real, genuine believer in Jesus. I will fight you to the living end on that. But I do sort of have this latent fear that oh no, someday they're gonna find out that I'm really a bad pastor. And that I'm just not good at this job.
They're gonna get their pitchforks and they're
Yeah.
gonna chase you out of that
And
tent.
they're gonna be so upset, and they find out that I don't know, that my organizational skills are so bad, or that
Are they bad?
I feel they're terrible. Yeah. They're so bad
Yeah.
that when I had done other job interviews and they inevitably get to that question of, well, what's your greatest weakness?
You say
Right.
organization?
Yeah, I mean, the temptation was always to say, well, I think I work too hard sometimes, right? Wink, wink.
Right,
Classic.
That I actually just started being honest and saying, you know what, my organizational skills are not the best. If you send me an email and tell me to, clean out my inbox, rather than sending you an email back and saying, affirmative, I'm just going to do it. And you're probably going to see me in the office and say, hey, did you get that message? And I'll simply point to my inbox and say, yes.
Maybe it's a lack of communication.
Lack of communication, also just over calendaring, right? Because I don't keep track of my own calendar well enough.
I should do that too.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that.
I double book myself.
I'm
for
in the
things
moment,
a lot.
man.
Yeah,
I don't I don't
I'm
like
living
that
free,
calendar.
bro.
Wow.
I got freedom in Christ.
Come on.
So, in any case, yeah, there is still that latent fear, that imposter syndrome, that someday they're going to find me out. And,
I think we need
they're
to
going to
do-
throw me out once they find me out.
We need to do an episode on imposter syndrome.
We will.
Because I think that's something everybody struggles with. Not even just Christians.
No.
Yeah.
Like, everybody probably has a level of that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being the president and having imposter syndrome?
No. I can't imagine being the president to begin with, so.
Right.
Not
There
only
you go.
can I imagine it, I frequently do.
Yeah, that's one of your, like, not so secret dreams.
I'm not surprised by this at all.
Yeah. And not only do I dream of being president, but presidents, when they go on vacation, they go to like Martha's Vineyard
Mm.
or somewhere really fancy. By the way, Martha's Vineyard is a community, I think, on Rhode Island. But
Sure.
they go somewhere really fancy and it's expensive. I would just come back here. No, I'm just gonna go hang out
My
with my
house?
friends in Temecula, and
Oh, okay.
gotta, and sure, bring the security detail, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'd be like Barack Obama would go to NBA games. I'd be at
Yeah.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, I
Maybe
just want to let you
every single
know, Jeff says he'd vote for you.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
So I actually have been voted for twice,
Yeah.
president. So someone.
But did they know it was you, or was it just like a write-in for somebody
It was
else with the
it was
same
a
name?
write-in in 2016. There was just a couple people who, they couldn't bring themselves to vote for any of the candidates.
Your
actually
mom doesn't
on the
count,
ballot.
Charles.
It wasn't my mother.
Nice.
Both of them were going to our church at the time, but they sent me a picture of their ballot and they had written my name in. So I don't know what that's worth, but I have to imagine that somewhere
That's more than I've gotten.
there's some certifying official who had to say, well, 2 votes for Charles Wolf, president.
And he wins by a landslide.
Yeah. But that's all neither here nor there.
That's funny.
To get back, sort of our central question.
Let's try to wrap up maybe with one more question or
Okay.
topic here.
So the last question I asked is why does society need the church, right? What do we add to society? I guess is sort of a different way to ask that question. There was one part of that answer that I didn't get to provide, because one of the things we add is spiritual knowledge and guidance about spiritual things. So all of the data, insofar as they can collect data on things like this, shows that people are becoming more and more spiritual. This idea that we're becoming this very atheistic, secular community, secular society, bigger than community, is actually quite faulty. People are becoming increasingly spiritual, but they are becoming decreasingly Christian and decreasingly religious across the board.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've probably run into in the last 5 years more people than at any other time in your life who say things like, well, I'm just trying to inject positivity.
Yes.
Or, I'm very spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Yes.
I'm sending thoughts your way.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Stuff like that.
Oh, look at my crystals.
Yes.
Vibes.
Sorry for anybody who's really into crystals.
Or essential oils, or Buddha, or sorry, maybe that was too far. In any case, we are still a very spiritual society, a very spiritual world, but people, I would say, are more lost about spiritual things than they've ever been. It would almost be, I don't want to say preferable if it was a more atheistic world, but there is just so much more confusion about the spiritual world because there's not definitive authoritative teaching taking place in most people's lives as they seek after spirituality. So what they end up with is sort of this mishmash of Eastern wisdom and spirituality, stuff like crystals, and of course good spirituality must smell good, so they get essential oils in there and things like that.
And don't forget to head out to Sedona where there's a nice vortex.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Certain places all of a sudden assume power.
Yeah.
Yoga is really just stretching. But all of a sudden it becomes this very spiritual experience, right? And I think one thing the church can and should really add to society is that we are a place, a community that you can come and join to receive real authoritative guidance from ancient texts and modern interpretations about spirituality and about spiritual things.
Yeah.
So if you are out there and you're a person who would raise your hand and say, well, of course I'm very spiritual, and I think a lot about the invisible realms and a lot about spiritual things, reach out to a church and see what the Christian view on spirituality is, because it is grounded in so much more than you probably assume it is.
Yes.
We exist as this, we exist as this agent that can have a powerful teaching role in people's lives to ground them in spirituality and grow them up in it. To give people real spiritual direction when it's so desperately needed, so that they don't end up with this very loose idea of spirituality as just being sort of positive energy or injecting positivity into the world. Because, by the way, who gets to define positivity?
Yeah.
Wasn't L. Ron Hubbard just doing his best to inject positivity?
Well,
into
we
the
all
world?
get to define our own positivity, our own reality, and just be happy, good people.
This was
and-
sarcasm, folks.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
sarcasm.
Just in case you
Yeah,
don't.
Rex is being very facetious. But he is
Don't
illustrating.
use words like facetious around me. Don't know what it
You
means.
knew what you were getting into when you
Oh.
asked me to do a podcast.
That's true.
So,
I know.
Very accurate.
I'm starting to regret it.
Big words.
so is the audience. In any case, that's the kind of attitude and orientation towards spirituality that a lot of people will end up with no influence from the church. We can be, for so many, a grounding force when it comes to their spirituality, because we do teach from texts that are authoritative. We do have real inspired words from the God of the universe, you know. And if you are truly about spirituality and exploring spiritual things, and you really are this free thinking journeyman in the spiritual world, then you should be open to what the Christian message has to say. We are one of the most ancient spiritual communities in the world.
Yeah.
Roughly 2,000 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So we should have some validity in your spiritual journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems that there has been this shift towards just kind of, yes, let's start over. Yeah, there has seems, wow, I can't talk tonight. Yeah, there does seem to be like a shift now where people are trying to define their own spirituality instead of finding it in a church. Because I think we're coming out of this, I don't know if it's a very legalistic background for a lot of people, but we're coming out of like having an authority over you. And not just in church, but just kind of in general, we're having this more me-centered society where you can kind of figure things out on your own. You can hop on Google and find people who agree with what you're kind of already thinking, and then just kind of build on top of things over and over and over until you've defined your own spiritual reality, and you've kind of shunned the authority of a church body because they've done all these wrongs in the past, or whenever you get a group of people together, there's going to be oppression, and you just kind of have these thoughts, these common ideologies now of authority is bad almost. And that's, to me, that's sad, because if you just automatically hear the word authority and think, oh, I'm going to be put down, you're missing out on something. There's some freedom in falling under some authority that I think a lot of people are just not understanding right now, and why they're maybe having an aversion to church is because they don't want to have some other fallible, thinks differently than me human being over them. And then there's probably the more deeper thought of, also I don't want to have an all-knowing God have authority over me who knows all my dirty secrets. You know, like, why would I want that? Why would I want to invite that? And they kind of fail to realize, well, he's there no matter whether or not you invite him in. But I think that they just feel more safe and secure not following that.
Yeah, there is a desire to depersonalize who God is in a lot of this spiritual but not religious movement, culture, whatever we want to define it as. Sorry, I'm sort of forming a thought here to summarize things together.
And it does feel like this could be a bigger topic.
Yeah, and maybe we'll revisit this at a later time, right? Because the question that we're really just trying to address is, why should anybody belong to a church?
Right.
I might cut all this out.
That's fine. That's fine if you do.
Because we're already just about an hour.
But I think our best effort to answer that question has arrived at three things about the church that are very true, and that I want people to hear and feel very encouraged about. The first place we went to is community. It is absolutely true that the church offers a unique sense, style, and flavor of community that you will not find anywhere else. And if you truly feel the need to belong somewhere, try a church. Walk in at least once and tell me that you don't feel accepted in at least some way. From community, we started to talk about ethics. We started to talk about morals. And I think most people would say that we live in a world that is decreasingly interested in talking about ethics and morals, which means that society needs the church more and more. because we are a long-standing agent of ethics and morality, at least in the Western world. A place that does send people back out into their community, formed spiritually, formed ethically, installed with a sense of morality that is truly concerned about justice and the well-being of the people around them. Not just because it would be nice if we could lift up our neighbors, and not just because we should be nice to each other. We don't even get to define what niceness is. They go out into their community with this sense of morality because it is something God has called them to do and to be. Because it is something that their church is reminding them over and over and over again to live up to. At least it should be. One of the best things that we as ministers can do for the Christian community is to remind them that they are called and blessed and sent people with a system of ethics to live up to and live by and broadcast to others. And finally, we arrived at the mind, right? The mind itself and all of its curiosity about spiritual things can be shaped and informed by the church. And if you are truly concerned with spirituality, the most secular definition that we could have for Jesus is simply to say he is one of the greatest spiritual teachers of all time. The greatest spiritual teacher of all time. That disregards his divinity and the sonship of God that we know he has. But if you are really interested in spirituality, and you're really about that as much as you say you are, then come under the heel of the greatest spiritual teacher who ever lived. How do you do that? Well, you crack open a Bible. Start with Matthew. You go to Mark. And you go to Luke, and then you go to John. And then you start reading the stuff that the people who met Jesus and who sat with him wrote. The people who were shaped by his teachings. You start to see the things that they wrote. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Revelation. You get into Paul's life, a man who encountered Jesus in an entirely different way and was taken out of a community that attacked the church and became one of its greatest servants. If you're really about spirituality, you should be interested in those stories. So, if the question is why church, let me start with your heart. That's the ethics stuff. Move to your mind. That's the spirituality stuff. And then move external to relationship with others. That's the community stuff. That's why church.
Well said, Chuck. I think we're going to wrap up now. That's it for tonight's podcast.
Let's do one more thing.
Sure.
Because I said we would do this in the first few episodes.
What?
Well, let's just let people get to know us a little bit better. I was sitting thinking throughout the day what would be a good question to ask.
Okay.
To reveal ourselves a little bit more to the audience tonight.
And we'll keep it under 10 minutes.
Yeah. These will be brevity.
We'll put these all together
is a
at
virtue
another point because it's not going to fit on this one.
Perfect.
I don't think it will.
All right. Well, why not? But the people who are listening live will have the benefit of hearing it.
There you go.
So last week I asked what makes a movie good, right?
Oh yeah.
What do you look for in a good movie?
Mm-hmm.
This week's question has nothing to do
That was
with
a
movies.
rough question for me.
Well, that's because
You don't give it any
that's because you
prep.
like crappy movies.
No, I like amazing movies, but they're hard to
Like words.
whatever.
Okay, so here's this week's question. Who was a childhood hero for you? Did you have a childhood hero? Did you care enough to even have a hero?
So I'll take that first.
Yeah, you go
If you
first.
say
Rex is a
Spider-Man, I
little
will
bit
stone cold
hesitant.
stunner you through this table.
Nice.
No, I want to say Spider-Man.
Of course, obviously. No, I will give a completely ridiculous, cheesy answer, and I will say my dad.
Oh,
I know. Oh, he's not even watching, which is.
he might watch
he's a dad.
later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's because I followed kind of in his career footsteps. I got into computers and technology, that sort of thing, which is what he does. And more than that, he was just he was my role model for what a good, godly family man should be. And of course, he plays the bass, and I don't have quite as much musical talent as he does, but yeah, that's who I would say, because I wasn't into pop culture, and I was a little bit sheltered. I would admit, as far as TV, music, movies and all that sort of thing. So I didn't have celebrity, hero or a superhero. I mean, yeah, I knew superheroes kind of basically, but it was definitely my dad, I would say. So,
Well, amen.
yeah.
I know your dad. He is a wonderful man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I like that answer. You shouldn't think that was cheesy. That was good. I don't have an answer for you. I don't feel like I could look back and really define somebody that I would call a hero, unfortunately. That
How
might
about
just
someone
be
you just look up to? There was nobody when you were young who you were like, man, when I grow up, I hope I can be this brave or
well, here,
smart.
you're gonna learn something about me right now.
Okay.
The defining issue, or maybe even sin of my life, is that I looked way too much to myself. I thought way too highly of myself. I didn't care about other people. That's who I was. And that's why I think this question's a little hard for me, because any time I might have spent idolizing somebody, really actually just spent playing video games, watching way too much TV, just living in a fantasy world rather than in this one. So I'm not giving you an answer to your question, but it is providing the goal of asking the question, which is getting to know Rex a little bit. I had a kind of a sad childhood. I wouldn't say I was like a depressed kid or anything, but I don't know, that's just not how I lived.
Okay.
That's okay. One of our audience members is with you on that, so.
Is there anybody you look up to now? So take childhood and scratch it from the question.
I can't look at you when I say this. I will say, Chuck, that getting to know you and getting to know your heart and how you've gone from who you were 10 years ago to who you are now is definitely something I look up to. I mean, obviously I look up to Mike just being a spiritual leader for me in the church. There's been other individuals that I felt have really given me something to aspire to. Your level of dedication to your work, what you do, is definitely something that I look up to. I struggle with wondering whether or not I do enough, but I'm glad that we're doing this together. But I also work full time, so I know that it's unrealistic to think that I'm going to do the same amount of ministry that you are doing. I don't know. I think I'm in a place now too where I can look at people and have the ability to see something in them that I can look up to. I mean, I can even look at Nate now, having only known him for a little while, and look up to just how strong he has been and what he's had to deal with. And just recognizing even the fact that like he came in and immediately wanted to start getting involved. He's only been here for a few months, I think 6 months maybe, that you've been like around, and you're already on the tech team helping out at church. Like you wanted to get back and involved, and I don't know if you did ministry before or not.
Nope.
No. But to see you now participating, I look up to that. Like that took some strength and some bravery, I would say, to jump into something you've never done. Like you haven't run a soundboard before, right? And now you're doing that.
That's true.
You did it the last 2 weekends, so yeah, I feel like now I can actually just look around and I can really look at people now and see them for actual genuine people who actually genuinely care about things, and I did not see that before. That again, I looked at people and thought everyone is out for their own self-interest, and that's largely because that's who I was, and I just thought everybody was like me.
Yeah. Well, let me say first, when I asked this question, I was not prepared to be part of the answer. So I'll just say
You weren't fishing for that?
I am never incredibly touched by that. I guess when I think about who's going to find me out at the church, I don't have to worry about you being part of it.
Well,
Bro,
I'm also scrutinizing you very closely.
Well, that's okay. But I just know that that is a blessing to me and an encouragement to
Well, you're welcome.
my ministry insofar as I have one. I guess for me, childhood icons, heroes, you know,
wrestlers.
well, in a sense, yes, but I knew then that they were characters, right? So if I were to say, well, I really looked up to Stone Cold Steve Austin, it would be as if I said I really looked up to Batman.
You look up to James Hetfield.
As a kid, maybe a little, but only because I was, you know, I just would have been wowed with the amount of success they could have making music that was so good. I did really, really look up to Ricky Carmichael,
Oh.
dirt bike racer, for those who
Yeah.
aren't familiar with the name, because he was a phenom, even as a young guy, and I was riding bikes and I wanted to be just like him.
Yeah.
He was legendary for his dedication to the sport. He was one of the first guys who trained at a pro athlete level to be a motocross racer. You know, he trained like a pro athlete in an age where a lot of guys were not really paying as much attention to their bodies. You know, as an adult, of course, the values I admire have really changed, and most of the people I look up to now are historical. You know, people like let's do a little history lesson for a
I
second.
know.
People like the Grimke sisters, who were 19th century South Carolinian aristocrats,
Oh.
lived in the lap of luxury in a house full of slaves, but were dedicated Christians, and ran away from home because they could not reconcile how a family that claimed to be Christian could own slaves. They died in obscurity and poverty because they walked away from a life of incredible wealth because of their Christian convictions about freedom and slavery.
Wow.
So people like the Grimke sisters, people like, you know, the Constitution signers, you know, because it's, you know, okay, so Scripture's the greatest story ever told, right? We can all agree on that.
Yes.
Signing of the Constitution, second greatest story.
There's some debate on that one, but okay.
Well, let me say instead, signing of the Declaration, second greatest story.
Okay.
Because those guys are essentially in a room together saying, we are putting our lives on the line for this principle, for this idea of a country that could exist for the people, by the people, of the people, where liberty is the law of the land. And they stood up to, and they knew that they were going to stand up to the biggest military power in the world. And then they won.
And they won.
They won.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool.
The Patriot by Mel Gibson doesn't even do it justice. And that movie is awesome.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah.
I did like that one. One of the few historical movies
Yeah.
that I actually liked.
So mostly historical characters, but, and you know, Nate, I'm kind of with you. This is going to be one of those answers that sounds really cheesy. Gosh, man, I just look up to Corey so much. My wife, especially.
She's
just-
pretty cool.
Just looking at what she's
I get
done in the last 6 months, it takes incredible, not just iron will, titanium will,
Mm-hmm.
to do the kind of work that she does,
Mhm.
taking care of children in a medical role, but then to not even be satisfied with that, but to look at how she spends her time and say, there's more that God could do with this if I was just more open to it. And then to reach out to an organization like Birth Choice because she so believes in the pro-life ideology, and to sacrifice more of her time and our money and other things to say, yeah, I want to do ultrasounds for expecting moms.
Mm-hmm.
And then to come into our church and say, yeah, I want to serve in the women's ministry. I want to help out Nate's mom in running and planning all of this stuff and making the women's ministry enriching and fun for the women who come to our church. To
Yeah.
watch her do that stuff just because she has this eagerness to please God, it just blows me away.
It's true.
So I don't know if she's listening.
Oh, she is, and she's crying.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Happy tears.
Did the wind blow? But in any case, she's someone who I really look up to because she is, dude, she's sold out for this. She loves God so much. And I'm perfectly okay with saying she loves God more than she loves me or anybody
Well,
else.
she better.
Yeah. I would expect her to.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you were to ask me today, point blank, you know, who's your hero? Who do you look up to? I don't care how corny it sounds. My wife is a hero. My wife is my hero. I wish I was as cool as she is. I never will be, but I can always aspire to be. You know.
Yeah. Well, now you're making my answer look kind of weak.
No.
It's not about comparison.
It was a huge blessing, I think, to both of us, to Nate the Great and myself. So thank you for your honesty.
Sure.
And thank you both for your honesty and your time. I hope our audience has gotten something out of this. You know, look for the podcast to be published someday. Episode 2, White Church. Thank you, men. Thank you, listeners. We will see you next time.
Good night.
This has been
Run Amok with Rex and Chuck.
and producer Nate.
Thank you.
All right, that's enough of that.
Very good.
Now I gotta go home and take a shower.
Good idea.
You don't get this jacked without getting a little sweaty,
That's right.
or a lot sweaty in my case. Oh, my hips.
Well done.
All right, if we're gonna keep doing this, we gotta get back in shape.
Okay. Well,
I'll look for ways
Make
to
a list.
invest here.
Make a list. we got your back. Producer / financial consultant. No, that's not the word.
financial backer.
Backer. Yes, that's it.
You do not have to do that, sir. But if you want to,
I don't mind.
I will not turn it
I mean,
down.
as long as we're not getting crazy, like spending
No.
thousands of dollars on a wall of amps and such.
Well then,
Yeah.
there goes all my ideas.
Right? It's all out the window.
Alright, well guys, let me save this before I do anything else.
Yes.